Welcome to Brian's Briefing, part of the Brian Nichols Show. I'm Brian Nichols, and in these focused episodes, I dive into key issues, ideas, and principles that shape our world. No frills, no fluff, just straight talk on matters that count. Now, let's get started. Today, we're tackling a hot-button issue that will almost inevitably impact all of us: Kamala Harris's proposal to tax unrealized gains. We're going to break this down into three parts: the problem, our analysis, and potential solutions. Plus, later we're going to outline our challenge of the week, plus recap our listener question. So, let's dive in. Kamala Harris is proposing to tax unrealized gains. But what does this actually mean for your average American? Well, let's break this down with a real-world example. Imagine you bought a house for $250,000. A year goes by, and suddenly your house is worth $300,000. Thanks, inflation. That's a $50,000 gain on paper. And under Harris's proposal, now you'd have to pay taxes on that $50,000, even though you haven't sold the house or seen a dime of that money. Now, you might be thinking, Brian, that sounds pretty rough. I mean, my house is worth more, but I really can't afford this, right? Correct. Where's this money supposed to come from? And are you going to have to take out a loan just to pay taxes on the money you don't actually have yet? And by the way, this isn't just about houses. This proposal will affect stocks, businesses, pretty much any asset that can increase in value over time. Now let's dig deeper into what this policy could mean for our economy and for our society. First, something we call scope creep. Now, while Democrats are pitching this as a way to make the ultra-wealthy pay their quote-unquote fair share, history tells a very different story. Remember when the income tax was first introduced? You probably don't, because that was well over 100 years ago, but it was supposed to only target the wealthiest Americans. And fast forward to today, and literally every hardworking American is now paying income tax. Number 2, stifling innovation and entrepreneurship. Think about small business owners who have poured everything into growing their companies. If they're taxed on the increasing value of their businesses before they've even sold it or made any real profit, what's the incentive to grow, to innovate, to take risks? Third, an impact on retirees. Yeah, consider retirees who've invested in stocks for years. Their portfolios might look great on paper, but they're living on a fixed income, meaning, okay, how am I supposed to pay taxes on stock gains that I haven't realized yet? Number 4, practical challenges. How do you accurately value assets that aren't actively being sold? What happens when asset values fluctuate? Do we really want the IRS and all 87,000+ of their new agents peeking into every nook and cranny of our financial lives? And number 5, economic ripple effects. This policy could it will discourage investment. It will lead to slow economic growth, and it will inevitably lead to job losses as businesses struggle to pay taxes on paper gains. So what's the alternative? What's the solution? Well, here you go. I'm glad you asked. Here are 5 principles that we should really consider. First, simplify the tax code. Now, I can hear all the libertarians out there screaming collectively, "But Brian, taxation is theft!" Yes, you are correct. But let's look at the real world right now, and instead of adding more complexity, let's streamline what we've got. Baby steps. A simpler tax code is way harder to game and easier for everyone to understand. 2, encourage investment and innovation, meaning we should be creating and promoting policies that reward risk-taking and entrepreneurship, not punishing them. Number 3, focus on economic growth. Folks, the best way to increase tax revenue isn't to raise taxes or create new taxes, but rather it's to grow the economy so there's more wealth to tax in the first place. But yes, taxation is theft, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Number 4, protect property rights. The idea that the government can tax you on the increasing value of something you already own before you've even considered selling it, that's a very dangerous precedent. So we need to protect the fundamental right to own and benefit property without government holding their hand out saying, "Where's my piece?" And number 5, create opportunities for all. No, this isn't some DEI fantasy, but rather something we can do right now to help empower others without tearing down the successful. Meaning, let's focus on some policies that make it easier for everyone to succeed. Let's talk about helping bring education back to the students and to the parents, helping empower students for starting out their careers. Let's reduce barriers to starting businesses. And how about empowering business leaders to start building solutions without the fear of a government bill for some new tax? Are you concerned about preserving your liberty and wealth in these uncertain times? Then you don't want to miss this year's XAT Money Summit, taking place online from October 7th through the 11th. Hosted by expat consultant Mikkel Thorup, this summit brings together over 40 experts to share their insights on international diversification. You're going to discover how to quickly acquire a second passport, diversify your finances offshore, invest in international real estate, and get an in-depth geopolitical analysis from thought leaders like Dr. Ron Paul and Doug Casey. Tickets are completely free. Just head to expatmoneysummit.com to reserve yours today. Take control of your future at the XAT Money Summit. That's expatmoneysummit.com. And now, back to the show. Now let's take a question from one of our listeners. Today's comes from Rachel in Florida, and she asks, "Brian, I understand your concerns about taxing unrealized gains, but what about the argument that the wealthy use unrealized gains as a way to avoid taxes altogether? Couldn't this proposal help close these very infamous loopholes?" Excellent question, Rachel. And actually, you're touching on a key argument that the proponents of this tax use, and you're right. Some wealthy individuals do in fact use unrealized gains as a way to minimize their tax burden. They can take out loans against their assets using the increasing value as collateral without triggering a taxable event. But again, I'd argue that this proposal is like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. Yes, it might address the specific issue, but at what cost? I mean, we've discussed the potential unintended consequences, which leads from stifling innovation, hurting retirees, to hurting small business owners. Remember, the goal should always be to have something more fair and efficient relative to what we have today. And something that, again, we can't forget this, encourages economic growth and innovation, meaning we need to be careful not to let this pursuit of fairness lead us to policies that could and will ultimately harm everyone, including the very people we're trying to help. All right, let's recap our challenge of the week from last episode. Last episode, I challenged you to look into local farming initiatives in your area, including community gardens and farmers markets. And the goal was to start thinking about how we can support local food production and reduce our reliance on those big chains. And kudos to you guys. You all delivered. I got so many great responses, one of which was Sarah from Michigan. She wrote, "Brian, I had no idea that there were literally 3 community gardens all within walking distance from my house. I've already signed up to volunteer at one." John at Texas said, "I actually visited a local farmer's market for the first time. Not only were their prices more competitive relative to the supermarket, but the quality was outstanding. I'm never going back to store-bought tomatoes again." Right there. Like, these stories are exactly why we do these challenges. It's about getting you out there, discovering some resources right in your own backyards, and taking small steps to support our local food systems. And shout out to our good friends there, John in Texas, as well as Sarah in Michigan. Now, we're going to go on to this week's challenge. And this week, it's all about understanding real-world implications of this proposed tax on unrealized gains. So I want you, again, to dig into your local economy a bit. But instead of talking about farmers markets or community gardens, today I want you to dig into the idea of what would happen to local businesses, small businesses in your area, if they were to all of a sudden have taxes on unrealized gains hit them. So go talk to small business owners. Try to understand how a tax on unrealized gains would impact their operations. And here are some questions you can ask. How could you come up with some cash to pay taxes on increased value if you haven't actually sold anything? What would taxes on unrealized gains do in terms of forcing you to sell off parts of your business or assets just to pay your tax bill? Or maybe how could this impact the ability for those businesses to grow their investments? And then I want you to share your findings with us. Again, this is the stuff, these real world examples that help us all better understand and better grasp the very real world impacts of policies, much like the ones we've discussed today. And remember, the goal isn't to push any particular viewpoint, but rather to gather information and promote thoughtful discussion about very real world implications of these proposed policies. So, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with just some quick thoughts. The policies we choose today will shape the America we will live in tomorrow, that our kids and our grandkids will live in tomorrow. So, whether it's a tax policy, regulation, or any other aspect of government, these decisions have very real-world consequences that will impact and affect all of us today and into the future. So let's be thoughtful, let's be informed, and let's work together to create an America that rewards innovation, encourages growth, and provides real opportunity for all, not just folks in government. This is Brian Nichols signing off for our Brian's Briefing. Remember, folks, it's not enough just to win the argument. We need to win hearts and minds. So get out there, have those conversations, and let's build a brighter future together. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep fighting for liberty. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.